everyone. Thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. So my name is Vanessa Cowan. I'm the Family Reunion Project Manager at the British Red Cross. And today with Denise McDowell and Ashley Tedros, we're going to speak to you about Refugee Family Reunion. So both the Greater Manchester Immigration Aid Unit, which Denise and Ashley represent, and the Red Cross have been running Family Reunion Advice Project. And we're going to speak to you today about what we have learned from this project. So I'll do more of an introduction to Family Reunion and the issues around Family Reunion. And Denise and Ashley will go more in depth about the rules attached to Family Reunion and around the model that GMIU have put in place, relying on volunteers to provide advice to refugees around their Family Reunion applications. So because it's the end of the day, I thought it would be nice to start with a little video, just to remind ourselves what Family Reunion is about. So I'm going to try and switch. So as you can see from this video, the moment where a refugee family is reunited is extremely powerful. And, oh gosh, sorry. No, not twice. Okay, I'll probably switch that off. Okay. So the moment where a refugee family gets reunited is very powerful. Of course, there's the delight of seeing each other after often months of separation. But there's also, for the family, really coming to the UK means finally reaching safety. And Hussein's family, whom you've seen on the screen today, were refugees in Egypt for a long time. They were originally from Syria, and they moved to Egypt to reach safety. And from there, Hussein came to the UK with his son and nephew, while the rest of the family was in a refugee camp in Egypt. And for the refugee sponsor here, it's a huge relief. It's finally being able to breathe at seeing their family reaching safety in the UK. It means that they'll be able to eat again, to sleep again, and to stop worrying. But as a lot of people know in the room, it can be very difficult to reach that moment. So in terms of the UK context, there's been an increase in the number of eligible refugees for Family Reunion because there's been more people claiming asylum since 2010 and more people being granted asylum. There's a need for specialist legal advice for Family Reunion, so not everyone can help refugees with filling an application form for Family Reunion. You have to be qualified to RIC level 2. But paradoxically, legal aid was removed for Family Reunion in 2013, leaving hundreds and thousands of refugees in need of legal advice. And of course, as we all know, and as the workshops today have shown, since LASPO, the legal advice sector has seriously declined, and that's leaving refugees even more vulnerable. Exceptional funding issues, there are still issues with the exceptional funding system, although it seems as if from specialist providers that it's getting better, but it's still not granted, and the grants for Family Reunion, for example, are still quite scarce. Talking about the Red Cross, we have a long history of helping refugees to reunite. Since the 1990s, when we started with our travel assistance project, we've helped over 7,000 family members come to the UK. And in the wake of the legal aid cuts, we started providing advice to refugees, thanks to comic relief funding, and especially thanks to the partnerships that we struck with specialist legal advice firms, of which Asylum Aid is one, and they're in the room, in London, Leeds and Manchester. So in Manchester with the Rochdale Law Centre, and in Leeds with the private advice firm. So we had we run those 3 pilot projects in England, and they were complementing an existing project that was in Glasgow, where although there is still legal aid providers don't have the capacity to help with Family Reunion as much as needed. So through those partnerships, which run until March 2015, we provided advice to 249 refugees. And we developed the Red Cross skill to OIC level 2. So when we started, Red Cross was qualified at level 1, and through those partnerships, our caseworkers who were seconded to the partners or mentored by the partners managed to build up their expertise and skill to end up being qualified at level 2 for family reunion. And very, very importantly, through these pilots, we managed to get a very, very strong evidence base, which then fueled our advocacy around family reunion. This is the cover of a report that was launched in the House of Parliament in July 2015, and it's accessible from our website, so I don't have hard copies today. But if you type the name of the report on Google, it will come up. And it's called Not So Straightforward because the reason why legal aid was removed for family reunion is because it was deemed straightforward process. And we found doing these pilots and this research that it was actually not so straightforward. So the complexities we found can arise at many different stages of the application process. And in your pack, there is a roadmap that's a bit more explicit than this. That really takes you through the refugee's journey around the family reunion application process. And the complexities can happen at any of these points. So around eligibility, there are very narrow eligibility criteria, and Denise will talk about this later. Around evidence gathering, being able to gather all the evidence that is going to prove that you are who you say you are and that you are related to your family in the way that you say you are related to them. Of completing the forms, which are not tailor-made for family reunion and which are very complicated for someone who doesn't necessarily know how to navigate the system and who doesn't necessarily speak very good English. To be able to reach an embassy, sometimes crossing international borders and often illegally and often at the peril of their lives. And then having to wait for weeks and weeks to know whether or not they've been granted a visa. And yes?
I was going to, are you finding it difficult because a lot of the embassies are closed at the moment?
Yes.
We're having to send our clients to like other countries.
Absolutely. It's been a huge issue. And yes, we try to help as much as we can with the process, but logistically it just remains a nightmare in a lot of cases. So we have clients at the moment in Yemen, and they're stuck. They know where they can't go anywhere. They can't cross into Jordan because they don't have the right papers. There's no embassy in Yemen. They're thinking of going to something in Southeast Asia, somewhere in Southeast Asia, to apply for a family reunion. So yeah, definitely huge issue. Don't have all the answers to that, unfortunately. And at this client from Zimbabwe told us, I could never have made the application on my own. I wouldn't know where to start. I don't agree with this being straightforward. So in our research, we found that most cases, so we looked at 91 cases at the beginning of our pilot project, the first 6 months of our pilot projects. And we found that most of the cases presented complexities that would undermine an application and that could really only be mitigated by qualified legal advice. And the biggest one was the lack of documentation. So as I said earlier, people have to be able to provide original documents proving that they are who they say they are, proving that they are related to their families. And that can be very, very difficult for a refugee family that had to leave their home in a rush, that had to cross borders. So those documents may have been misplaced, they may have been lost or burnt. That is, if they existed in the first place, because in a lot of countries where refugees come from, the documents that would be required by an English or a British administration do not exist. And so, for example, we found that for applications concerning children, 46% of the families were missing children's birth certificates. For applications concerning spouses, 34% of the families missed their marriage certificate. And sometimes they did have the documents, but these documents were not deemed genuine. So, for example, at the moment there is a lot of difficulty around Syrian documentation and what is genuine, what is not genuine, and there's a lot of pushback, it seems, from the embassies. For a child to prove that they've been adopted, they have to have been adopted in a country that has been recognized by the Hague Convention. So even if they have official papers from their country, if it's not part of that Hague Convention, then it's as if they hadn't been officially adopted. And at the moment, there's also a lot of issues with documents that are reissued contemporaneously. So if a birth certificate is reissued in 2015 for the needs of an application, then the embassy is not interested in it, basically. Then lack of English skills, so again, to navigate the process, understand the information, the scarce information relating to family reunion, and being able to apply. So 62% of the sponsors here didn't speak enough English to be able to do that. Difficulties around children who did not fit the very restrictive criteria, so orphan siblings, for example, stepchildren and informally adopted children who were not eligible but were integral part of the family, of the pre-flight family, and who, if left behind, would have been in very, there would have been serious safeguarding issues. And we know of many cases where this has happened, where the embassy the entry clearance offices has granted visas to one part of the family and not part of the 2 under 10 children who did not fit the criteria. There's also, where legal advice was needed, is where there are discrepancies in asylum and family reunion interviews, and that can happen very often for a variety of reasons, either because refugees do not know that they are supposed to tell their whole family story at the time they're interviewed for asylum, or because they're worried about the safety of their loved ones. And also administrative failings, so going to an embassy, even if you have an appointment, not being able to get into the embassy because the person in front of the embassy is not in the mood that day, or because you don't have the right papers and you're not able to go back in. We had a case where the subsequent to lodging their application, so it was a family in Sudan who lodged their application, were told they had to get a TB test, went to get a TB test, and then were never able to give the TB test back to the embassy because they were not allowed in. So the solicitor had to put a whole new application together again just for them to get an appointment at the embassy. But most of all, I think through our project, we found out family reunion is a protection issue. And that's just an illustration from one of our Bidoon clients whose family was persecuted because he was wanted as someone who had tried to protest and try to request the same rights as other people. He said, my family was persecuted by the authorities because I was wanted. They were persecuted because they were Bidoons and because of my activities. And for us, that was not a revelation because it was something that we knew was happening. But I think, through our project, time and time again, this is something that we are reminded of every day. And I think in the context of this current refugee crisis, we've really realized how much family reunion is not an immigration matter, but it is a protection issue, and it is a protection route to the UK. During our research, we found that of these 91 families, 51% of the applicants overseas, of whom over 95% were women and children, had been subjected to security risks, such as abduction, arrest, and violence. And sometimes this was even on the way to the embassy. So we had a young Syrian boy of 17 who left Syria to go and lodge his embassy in Turkey, and on the way he was abducted and tortured for 4 days before being released and finally being able to reach Turkey. At the moment, we're working on another case where a child was conceived post-flight, so not part of the pre-flight family. The dad came to the UK and was granted was granted asylum. He came back to Sudan, where his wife was in a refugee camp, and they conceived a child. That child was considered post-flight, so not part of the pre-flight family. So the mom got a visa, the child didn't, and the mom's visa was expiring, so she had to leave. She felt she had to leave. She was worried that she wouldn't be given another chance, and the baby is still there. It's been fought through the courts, and you can imagine how, it's hard to imagine how a decision like that can be made, really. And the child is 1 year old, I would say. So the recommendations of our report were, first of all, and this is something that we are still hoping to be heard about, to reinstate public funding for legal advice, again, because we don't think it's a straightforward immigration matter. And there has been a case, which is the case of B, which is, well, some of you might know about, and it's still being decided. So it's basically the Islington Law Centre argued in front of the courts that legal aid should have been granted for family reunion, and if not legal aid, then exceptional case funding. That was the case of B that was coupled with a lot of other cases last year in a big court case. And exceptional case funding was granted for the case of B, but now B is appealing to go to the Supreme Court, and they are arguing that family reunion should be granted legal aid in general. So this is still to be decided. To the Home Office, we called to the Home Office to simplify the application form and provide better guidance for decision makers. And this is something that we know the Home Office is working on, and so we hope that this will come soon and in a way that is going to be better for refugees. And then to the FCO, to recognize the different protection needs of family members and try and work with embassies to make sure that the safety concerns are taken into considerations. And just the next step, so as I said, the Home Office is working on a new guidance and form. In the context of this refugee crisis and also in the context of the new immigration bill, there's been a cross-party support for an amendment to the immigration bill, which is asking for an expansion of the family reunion criteria to more dependents, and especially to the parents of child refugees. And this is still being debated. My understanding is that it's in the House of Lords at the moment, but it's already received backing from 10 MPs and 4 Lords, and hopefully this will continue to gather momentum. The Independent Chief of Borders and Immigration is starting an inspection on family reunion processes as well. So some of us have been asked to feed into that inspection, and we have made our concerns heard about decision making around family reunion, about the protection aspect and the safeguarding aspect. And the Red Cross is soon publishing or making public a guide to family reunion, which hopefully will help advisors support refugees through their application and refugees themselves who may want to undertake the process on their own if they haven't been able to find an advisor. And yes, as I said, the case of B and IS are still to be resolved. And that is it, I think. How do I do it?
That's great.
Okay.
4 o'clock.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you.
Okay.
Do you want me to put your...
Please. I'll just do the next bit, but I won't spend too much time on the rules. But I think what's important is where, from the Greater Manchester Immigration Aid Unit, where the impetus came for us to set up a project, we were outraged and we really lobbied hard to keep Refugee Family Reunion and other things within scope of LASPO, and clearly we lost on that. But it was an absolute determination that even though it had gone out of scope, it was something that we couldn't let go. It was something that we were just going to, with whatever we could, hang on to and try and make something work. We conceived a project. I think it's handy having a non-lawyer like myself who goes, what's that? Why is that so complicated? And asked some of the questions that I think was quite interesting in a very legal situation to try and work out which of the bits then of Refugee Family Reunion were the bits that had to be done by a lawyer that knew all about the law and case law and, do you know what I mean, could advocate, etc. And which were the bits that the likes of me and others like me could do. So which were the bits that we could go and help somebody try and get the documents. We could go and help organise a I don't know, an email to family in Iraq, and they would send something back over by, do you know what I mean, by post. We could do those very practical things. And so we conceived a model, which Ashley will tell you about in a second, that was based on that was based on separating and working which are the bits that are legal and which the bits are not. But what we knew we had to do was, we'd had to do the, thank you, I've got someone doing me bits for me, is that obviously we had to be very clear about what we were trying to do. We were very clear that this was something that could only be for people who had refugee status or humanitarian protection. So whilst lots of other people do want to reunite with family, in terms of this project, that was the criteria. It was refugee family reunion. We knew that we had to look at the rules around pre-existing family, and we recognised that what that was in the rules were spouses or civil partners, a longer explanation on that for 2 years, or children under the age of 18. We knew that that was going to be complicated for families where one or more of the children that had been brought up together in a family had reached the age of 18 or over, or where there were children who'd been brought up as members of as though they were as members of a family, but actually weren't biologically linked, but didn't know themselves. All sorts of complications. But we knew that these were the rules that we would have to be able to demonstrate to the entry clearance officers in the different parts of the world where people were making these claims. The rules are very clear. In one sense, that quite helps, because there are not many of them, but the rules are clear on spouses and the rules are clear on children. We knew that we would have to provide evidence to meet each of the criteria within these rules, but being based within a legal organisation, again, we were able to define which are the legal bits and which are the non-legal bits. So what is the opinion on whether the marriage certificate is necessary or not, right? That would be a legal opinion. Getting hold of the marriage certificate, if it exists, or if it's a country that issues marriage certificates, is not. That's much more practical. And so that's how we separated out the kind of the legal and the non-legal bits, knowing that it would have to be in order to meet the spouse rules, in order to meet the children rules. We were very fortunate to be able to secure money from AB Charitable Trust in order to set this up and to test it out and to run it through. And the model that we set up, we've kind of tweaked little bits of it, but actually it's very much almost the same as it was when we originally conceived it. And to date, we have reunited 150, 170 families since LESPO. So in terms of the kind of what have we achieved from it, it has been fantastic. But I'll ask Ashley just to run through now the kind of how we've done some of that.
Yes, please. Okay. Right. It's not easy to say. When you do it practically, it's better. Yeah, because I've been doing the family reunion for 2 years now, and it's much easier for me to do it straight than telling to people you have to do it. Although I have to, because I run also a project with volunteers. I can't do it on my own. So what the model we really use is straightforward model. Once the client has the sponsor client come through our doors, it could be a refer from other organisation, come through our door, or someone has told you, oh, I've been to this place, can you go and do it? That's the only place you could go because it's free, they will help you, they will support you. So once it's been there, so it's been assessed by our caseworker because they have to see the legal side of it. Once it's assessed, it's passed to me, which I'm the project coordinator, and then with my volunteers, so we got every sponsor will be helped to prepare the applications. So the volunteer, I'll talk a bit later on what the volunteer do with that specific person, because everyone comes from different countries, everyone don't have the same document, everyone have different circumstances and situations. So once it's been completed, the caseworker will check the whole bundles and it's ready to be given back to the sponsor to be sent to their family member to attend the visa application centres. So that's the easy bit of the model we're using. The way we're using our volunteers are very vital to our projects. We recruit volunteers from different countries because of the language skill they've got and their background also, which understand the immigration rules, the process of the asylum, the process of the refugee and all that. And all our volunteers obviously have to read and write English because you have to fill forms, you have to do it on online computers. I mean, the online IT skills need to be really important. And also the experience of these volunteers, not all of our volunteers are refugee, but we would love to have more refugee volunteers obviously because, as I said, they know the process and they understand that bit of, because you need that support to give to our sponsors, the sponsors. Again, it's the time and the commitment. It could be a straightforward application, it could be a long process application for that family, depending. If you have to do a family, wife, and 7 children, that's 8 applications to do. It's a long process, it takes a long time. 8 applications online to do, 8 appendix 4 to fill, and then obviously the bundle become bigger and bigger. And more documents to add, more copy to do, more facts to do, and obviously more document to check by our caseworkers. The volunteer task and role, that's really, really important. It's coordinated by me and trained obviously by me and then one of the legal solicitors in our firm. What we train our volunteer is to help the sponsor to gather, and that's the crucial bit, is to gather the evidence. And those evidence are very, very important for the success of the application and also for the entrepreneurs to accept and get a visa for these family members. So from birth certificate to marriage certificate to the essential document, the statement of evidence, so while they've been going through the asylum process, the passport, or now people are using Viber, Skype, WhatsApp. So the way to copy all these documents, it could be Viber for 2 years to print and copy. That takes quite a long time, and most of our sponsors don't know how to use, although they've got a smartphone, they don't know how to do a screenshot, they don't know how to copy or print all this WhatsApp and all that. So that's the support that our volunteer will have to do one-to-one basis with the sponsor. Also, some documents need to be translated, so it's a contact with the translation company to compare facts or scan all this document, and obviously the follow-up of all this document to be back to us and add it on our application when we do it. Also, as you all know, I don't know, all of you might have done family reunion applications, most possibly might have not done. It's a VAT4, what we call it, it's paperwork, but it's also an online application to do, which 9 sections. It's a long process to do it, and next to it is another appendix 4 to add with it. And all these documents are very crucial, and you have to be very, very accurate with the time, the date, the name spellings, and all that. So that takes quite a long time. You have to match it with their passport, with the name that the person has given when they claim asylum. So all these are very meticulous work in order the entrepreneurs not to say, well, you've not put the right date, or you've not put the right names, or the spelling are different. So you have to explain why the spelling are different. As you all know, Ashley could be written ASLI, and this one, so everyone called me Ashley, but it's not Ashley, so obviously that makes a difference. It looks like different person, but it's still the same person. So we have to explain that to the entrepreneurs. At the same time, our volunteer will help the sponsor to write what we call a statement, but it's more a chronological history of the person from their family life until they arrive in the UK and how they keep in contact. So we put a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all their history, and so that is prepared by our volunteers. And also all this is done, obviously it's passed to our caseworker who does the legal side of it, checking all our documents are ready, documents are translated, and that is passed to the caseworker. And also the booking of the visa centers. Like Vanessa said, some of the visa center there is not in the country, so they have to travel to another country. So that is organizing and working together like a team with the sponsor and the volunteer when the person could travel, and if there is any issue, how they could get to that country. And booking the appointment at the right time, and there could be any issues, so that's what my role happened, where I always do the follow-up of it and the contact between the sponsor and their family. What we learned with this project, since I think it's been 2 years I've been as a volunteer and now coordinating the project, our volunteers are very passionate about the job. It's a great feeling, I'll tell you, a great feeling when you see the family going through the whole process and you get in there and they bring in the family to the office. It's, I don't know, it's great to be honest. And also the time consuming. As I said, if it's a family of eight members, then it's a time consuming of 8 applications to do. 8 online applications, 8 paperwork applications to do, 8 folders to prepare, a copy for the family, for the sponsor also. Also, the application need a lot of legal advice. That's the great thing that we got at JMIU. We've got the solicitors, the caseworkers next to it in our building, so it's easier to go and speak to them and say they could advise us what kind of a document could be equivalent to what we're looking for to add in the applications. Also keeping up with the country. So I mean, what is going on? Like, so now that we got a visa, then it's good. So we keep in contact with our sponsor, the sponsor also, and then also do keep in contact with us too. So obviously it's a teamwork, like I said. It's not a one-person job. If they could do it, they could do it on their own. It's because it's teamwork that we're working together and making a successful application for the sponsor. I think that's it.
I'll just say one last bit just at the end, which is about exceptional funding. One of the things, when we first started the project, when LASPO first came into force, exceptional case funding for the first 12 months, 18 months, there was absolutely no chance of us getting it. People tried it, spent hours and hours making the applications, and it was rejected. And so we kind of gave up on it. Since the illegal challenge, there has been a softening of attitudes, or a kind of slightly more encouraging response in the applications for exceptional funding. And so we're now looking at how we maximise the legal aid that we can get in order to use it on these cases, because having made the argument that it should never have gone out of scope, we also want to be able to use whatever's in it to be able to preserve that and argue kind of why it is important now and why it should never have gone in the first place. The funding is only really for complex cases, so the kind of straightforward family reunion, exceptional funding won't fit. But for the complex ones with adopted children or child over 18 or all sorts of different things, then it is an approach that we're taking, and we're looking to make it as easy as possible, creating with Public Law Project some templates to see if we can speed up the time it takes to make the application so that we can make more applications, because it does take hours. They're not kind of straightforward, unfortunately.